Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, inshallah, today we are going to start our fourth chapter, which is known as anxiety disorders. Now, you are very well familiar with this word anxiety, as it is in our common usage. That so many times in our daily life we use anxiety. We say that we are getting anxious at this moment. We are getting anxiety, or we are facing anxiety due to the upcoming examination, or there are so many reasons being anxious in our daily life. But that anxiety is not problematic. The anxiety which relates to normal daily life, it is not problematic. It becomes problematic when it becomes pathological, when it becomes more intense, more excessive worrying is included, and when it becomes very long, the duration of the suffering becomes very, very long, then we will term it as anxiety disorder. So what anxiety disorder is? Anxiety disorder is a group of mental illnesses that cause constant and overwhelming anxiety and fear. It is a disorder which is characterized by worrying, apprehension, fear, which are constant, which are persistent for a longer period of time, and overwhelming, like it completely controls the individual's life. It is very much intense and excessive. Then we will label it as an anxiety disorder. People with anxiety disorder frequently have excessive, intense, and persistent fear about everyday situation. So many times we see anxiety disorder as the fear of unknown. They suffer from fear, intense fear, excessive fear, but apprehension. But the reason is not solid behind this apprehension and fear. It is baseless. So this anxiety, when it is persistent, intense, excessive, and it becomes completely overwhelming, then it becomes pathological. Then it is an disorder. Excessive anxiety can make you avoid work, school, family get-together, and other social gatherings that might trigger the symptoms. Now, these are the consequences that what happens after getting too much or taking too much anxiety for a longer period of time, that individual avoids different life situations. That may be the work setting, that may be the family setting, that may be the other social gatherings. But individual avoids those social gatherings because when he becomes part of these gatherings, the symptoms, they get triggered, they start up, and they may get worsen. So many times the individual may have panic attack in that particular situation. So what happens, that individual finds it easy to avoid that particular situation. Now, the symptoms of anxiety disorder, or when you are suffering from intense anxiety, as you might be aware of few of the symptoms, but the list of the symptoms include feeling nervous, tense, restless, having a sense of impending danger, coming danger. That is very it is just the apprehension of the individual that something threatening or dangerous is going to happen. Having an increased heart rate, breathing rapidly, sweating, trembling, feeling weak and tired, trouble concentrating. Because of these things, the individual is unable to concentrate on the required task, and instead of that concentrates on the things which make the individual anxious. Having trouble sleeping, experiencing gastrointestinal problems. Gastrointestinal problems are problems related to your stomach, like diarrhea. Having difficulty controlling worry. Urge to avoid things that trigger anxiety. Urge is the desire, so individual avoids those things that basically start up the anxiety in the individual. So these were the major symptoms of anxiety disorder. Now coming to the types of anxiety disorders. Now let me tell you that as in first year you have studied that in clinical psychology there is a book which is known as Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. That is very important book because within that book the detail of all the disorders is mentioned. So right now the edition which is being followed by the practitioners is the DSM-5. But your book is according to DSM-4, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 4, TR. So we will be definitely doing accordingly, like according to your book. So in your book, 6 types of anxiety disorders are mentioned, but right now, according to DSM-5, there are 11 types of anxiety disorders. Like anxiety disorder has become more broadened and it is given more space in the DSM-5 because of its very common prevalence, because it is becoming very, very common and major disorder. So the types of anxiety disorder include phobia, panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and acute stress disorder. Let me tell you one more thing, that acute stress disorder is not as such a type of anxiety disorder according to DSM. But as it is mentioned in your book, so we will be doing it as the type of anxiety disorder. The very first type of anxiety disorder is phobia. Now phobia, you are very well familiar with this word phobia. It is derived from a Greek word, and which was the name of the god, Phobia. So you must be aware of the difference between the phobia and fear. When we fear a thing, then it means that our fear is very much realistic. It is irrational. But when we suffer from phobia, then it is also a fear. But that fear is not rational. It is not realistic. It is irrational fear. Fine. It is a fear which mostly people do not suffer from. There are specific people who just suffer from ordinary life things which are not harmful. So in phobia, individual suffers from fear of harmless things. So meaningless, irrational fear of a thing or incident is known as a phobia. It is meaningless. There is no reason behind suffering from fear of that particular object, and it is irrational. Like you do not convince yourself that you may suffer from this particular fear. So it is an irrational fear, which is termed as phobia. The person suffering from phobia dreads ordinary and harmless things. Dreads means fears. He is apprehensive of ordinary things, ordinary life events and situations, and harmless things, and avoids such situations that apparently pose no threat. For example, people who are suffering from social anxiety disorder, they avoid situations where there is a lot of gathering of people. So gathering of people is completely harmless. It contains no harm. But people who suffer from this phobia, they avoid those particular situations. Now people, they may have phobia of snakes, spiders, cockroaches, lizards. Some people, they have fear of mountains, dams, bridges, and even insects, blood. So there is a huge list of phobia which contains all the objects that are usually harmless. So phobia affects a person's social as well as professional relations. Definitely, when you suffer from a phobia related to any object or situation, then you avoid that situation. Then you don't want to encounter that particular object or incident. So avoidance behavior occurs. People, they try to avoid, and in this way they suffer from their bad performance, specifically in professional settings and in social relationships. They stop having interaction with other people, because in any way that gathering, that meeting is going to trigger the symptoms of anxiety related to that particular object. Now, there are different views according to different schools of thoughts that why phobia develops. According to the psychoanalyst, things causing phobia are symbolically related to person's unconscious. Now, you are very well familiar with the psychoanalysis school of thought, which was given by Sigmund Freud, who is the founder of that school of thought. And this school of thought gave a lot of emphasis to unconscious experiences of any individual and their effect upon the later life. So, according to them, the phobia from which a person suffers, it basically represents something that has happened during the childhood or symbolically representing some other thing. So, that person becomes fearful of that object in later life. So, and according to behaviorists, they give importance to individuals' behavior, and they mainly, behaviorists mainly say that the cause of the phobia is basically conditioned. It is learned. Like people, they learn phobia. Like they see someone else to becoming fearful from any object, and during childhood, they also start fearing that particular object. So it is a conditioned process, and according to them, that it is through behavioral techniques it can be treated, like that fear can be deconditioned. So according to behavioristic school of thought, modeling is the important cause, or imitation is the important cause of developing phobia. And according to psychoanalysts, the unconscious experiences are the important cause of developing phobia. Now, the types of phobia include specific phobia and social phobia. Specific phobia arises from specific thing and is associated with a particular situation or stimulus. When the phobia is due to a specific thing, a specific situation, then it is termed as a specific phobia. Just like the fear of beasts, animal, insects, mountains, valleys, rivers, so blood. So this is the fear relevant to specific situation or object. So it is specific phobia. Now these are different types of specific phobia: claustrophobia, hydrophobia, acrophobia, zoophobia, and hematophobia. Claustrophobia is phobia of closed places. Hydrophobia is phobia of water. Acrophobia is phobia of height. Zoophobia is phobia of animals. Hematophobia is phobia of blood. And then is the social phobia.